you join me in my sewing room and in my usual sewing attire, which is my pyjamas. I thought I would show you around my sewing room because a few people asked for a tour of my sewing space and Ian's just cleaned it, so it's hygienic. No, it's usually pretty tidy, but it gets cluttered. I have a lot of sewing stuff, like everybody. So first of all, I'll show you the room where my sewing space is. This is my living room, which is also the lounge, TV room, and door out to the balcony, and my sewing space, and also serves as our kitchen. It's actually really good because although we don't have a lot of space, it works really well. It's very kind of multi-purpose and we've got it set up to just to work really well for us. So this is the world-renowned Wangle Zone, and the Wangle Zone started off as 2 tables in the corner of the room, and it's gradually expanded, and Ian's kind of gradually become more and more resigned to it. If you don't know me, then Ian is my housemate, carer and best friend who I live with. He is a wonderful man. So this is my sort of standing cutting area that I originally set up. It's got one of those IKEA pegboards on that's absolutely brilliant. Love it. It's so useful. A really handy thing here is the little bin that I've got for the waste that you get in your sewing area that isn't textile waste, because it's very annoying to go over to the kitchen bin for stuff like that every single time you get a little bit of paper on something, masking tape or whatever. So I've always got a few projects that are waiting to be cut out. There I've got a couple of pairs of peppermint in the folds wide leg pants waiting to be cut out. Artwork there is by me. It is a copy of a skull by John Pinkerton that, if you watch Sherlock, is on the wall in Sherlock's flat, and I did a sort of collage style copy of it. I've got a old vintage lamp with a shade that I recovered myself using some vintage bark cloth curtain fabric. I've got one of those thread reels that you get from Amazon. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. So handy. I mean, they look cute, but they're just so useful. Then I've got the pegboard that has all the stuff that I use a lot. I have got a Pink Pig pencil sharpener, which actually belongs to Ian. Masking tape that I swear by, use all the time. It's just from Poundland. I've got a postcard here from Vivienne Westwood. It was from a show that an exhibition that was in Sheffield, and it says, "Fashion's just life, and I do believe that appearances are everything." I'm a great fan of Vivienne Westwood, partly because I used to be a punk, but mainly because of her kind of attitude. I appreciate it a lot. So yeah, I've got my thread snips hanging up here, and a postcard that was a gift from a lady who sent me a pattern in Australia. And here I've got an IKEA plant pot that's full of all my fabric scissors, pinking shears, what do you call it? The thing that you use to clean lint off. I've got a little cartoon picture of me here with Betsy in my hair from when I had blonde hair. That's by my friend Sazzle, who I mentioned in some other vlogs. She buys me vintage patterns sometimes. She is an illustrator and she always does me beautiful cards at my birthday and things. I've got absolutely loads. Then Ian had a little portrait of himself done at a Mark Watson gig. So we have them together because it's just a nice little family portrait thing. The vintage 1970s cup mug is from my grandma's house. I have quite a lot of my grandma's stuff around my sewing space. This is ebony, this box. I use them to keep binder clips in, clover clips. That was from my grandma's house. This little china pot here and this green one, both from my grandma's house. This little teak pot with a mother of pearl inlay in the lid that I just use to keep my binder clips in. There often isn't a lot of room for sort of stuff like this in modern lives, and I really like sewing. It's given me a way of using and appreciating stuff from from my grandma. Here I've got an ironing mat, which I will link to my blog where I tell you how to make one of those. This is made out of the back of an old clip frame, some old tiles stapled to it and then covered in canvas and just stapled closed on the back. And before I got myself a tabletop ironing board, it made a brilliant ironing mat. We can't get rid of it now because Betsy absolutely loves it. She sits on there every afternoon and she likes to perch there, so I can't get rid of that. Then down underneath the Wangle desk, I have an IKEA unit with loads of some of my quilting stuff, some of my works in progress, Fisker's cutting mat, which I really recommend if you quilt. It's like a ruler with a guillotine on it. It's really handy. A scrap box, and here I've got a vintage machine at the bottom, and then my faff, which I keep on meaning to sell, still haven't got around to it. And then bits and bobs of fabric. Here I have my box where I keep my blocks that I've made, my rolls of tracing paper, my meter sticks, all the stuff that is too big, my dot and cross paper, and then this is the back of the telly, so I have to be careful not to bang into the telly with my bum and knock it over while I'm sewing. This area here is where my sewing table lives when it folds away. If you've seen my sewing table vlog, you'll see that it folds down to a very small size, but at the moment I've got it out so I can show you it. So if I just swing round, this is my sewing table in action. You can see it's quite big. It's about just over 150 centimetres long by about 80 wide, I think. At the moment I've got some red leather on there, pleather, because I'm cutting out a moto jacket. So, just continuing with the Wangle Zone, I've got my sewing table, which is a 1950s, might actually be early 60s, kitchen table that folds out and the two leaves at the side, so it folds down to smaller than that. I actually was going to get rid of it because I didn't have anywhere to put it in this flat. We decided that we didn't want to have a dining table up all the time because we never have people round, there isn't really enough room, and we were rarely at a table. We thought having a dining table set up was a bit of a waste of space. So when I started sewing, it was brilliant. We actually had this table out on the balcony and we were able to bring it indoors and put it into service. So this is where I've got my sewing machines that I use all the time. So I've got my two overlockers. And what I normally do is, whichever one I'm using, I leave on here, and then the other one I'll pop out of the way up on the table so that I've got more room on the table to manoeuvre. Because I've got my Juki here, and the Juki's quite a big sewing machine. Now I've got some footage of the Juki in action because I thought rather than just switch it on and me show you how to thread it and sew a seam, I actually wanted to show it you while it was being used in projects. So over the last few months, I've been saving up bits of footage, so I'm going to pop that in now and show you my Juki in action. I'll just turn her on. Hello! So at the moment it opens on the screen that shows that it's set to an ordinary straight stitch with the ordinary settings, middle needle position and 2.4 stitch length, and it shows you which feet you can use, the ordinary main foot or the zipper foot. And this line here shows you that you'll be doing a straight stitch. I am just sewing a regular seam. So what I really like about the Juki is that it offers a lot of automation. So tiny little processes that you do all the time sewing, it does for you automatically, and it just makes you sewing a lot faster. I don't use the foot pedal with my machine. The Juki has various settings that you can use the foot pedal for, so as well as using it to press down and sew forward, you can also kick back and tap with the base of your foot and it will perform certain actions, and you can program the machine whether you would like it to do things like raise the presser foot or snip the threads or do a lock stitch. So you can really choose according to the type of sewing that you're doing. Another thing that the Juki can be programmed to do is leave the needle up or down. I really like the needle to be left down because I find it annoying when I have to pivot and there's no needle left in my work, so my work can shift. And I know quilters obviously like the needle to be left down for when they're moving their quilting around the machine. So I find that really useful as well. But as I said, I always use the buttons on the front of the machine. So one of the first things I'll show you is the lock stitch. So this button here has the reinforcing lock stitch, which means the machine takes an automatic backwards and forward stitches at the beginning of your seam, or a lock stitch, which means it takes 4 tiny stitches in the same place at the beginning of your seam. And when you press this button, you press it once for the reinforcing lock stitch, or twice for the whatever you call it, same place lock stitch. And when you press this button, it automatically locks the beginning of the seam. So when you come to the end of your seam, you press either that button, which does the reinforcing lock stitch, or that one which does the same place lock stitch, and it will perform the lock stitch action, and then it will cut the threads and raise the needle and the presser foot. And so you can immediately take your work and lift your next piece of work and feed it straight in. You don't have to trim any seams, you don't have to raise the presser foot, it's all done for you. And obviously you do that a lot of times when you're sewing a garment, especially if you're sewing kind of batch sewing one thing after another, so you can imagine it speeds things up lots. So I will show you that in action. So you can raise the presser foot by using the lever at the back, which has the option to raise it right up high, or you can use the button at the front, which just raises it to the half position. So I'm going to go ahead and sew now. So the presser foot is already raised. I always use a seam guard, by the way. I think it's laziness, but I do find that it gives me straighter seams. So I'm going to lower the presser foot, and to kick off, all I'm going to do is lower the speed and start sewing. So as you can see, it's taking 4 stitches in the same place to lock the seam, and it's very quiet. It's got a really lovely wide flat bed. I mean, the workspace feels absolutely massive. It's got a lot of space back, front and side. I haven't tried quilting on it yet. So I'm coming to the end of my seam, so I'm pressing the lock stitch button, and there you go, it's all finished for me, so I don't have to touch it. And there's my rather wobbly seam because I wasn't concentrating, but you get the general gist. I'm going to run the machine on top speed just so that you can see and hear what it's like. Terrifying. This is way quick enough for me. I'm just come to the pockets now on these jumpsuit trousers that I'm making, so I just thought I'd show you the pivot function. So I'm just going to start sewing and then stop, and you can see that the presser foot automatically raises, it leaves the needle in the work, so it's quite easy to just, and I've managed to estimate it at exactly the right point, well done me. So you can just stop and pivot your work and go on again, and it'll automatically lower the presser foot for you and start again. I mean, these things, it sounds very lazy, but they really do make a difference. I'm going to pivot my work again. Welcome back to my sewing space. I hope you enjoyed seeing about my Juki. My sewing chair was actually free. It was from Free Cycle, and it's a really, really good quality office chair that there's nothing wrong with. An office was just getting rid of it and having a clear out. It was down in Bloomsbury, and they popped it on Free Cycle, and Ian went to pick it up for me, bless him, on the bus, brought it home on the bus, because I really struggle with sitting down basically, but this has got loads of ergonomic features, so I can adjust it to suit my back, I can adjust the armrests, seat height, all that. So that was a great find, and I would like to reupholster it actually, but I haven't got around to that yet. So in the Wangle Zone, we've got a lovely orange fake sort of angle poise lamp. Well, it is an angle poise lamp, but it's a copy of one. That's from Wilko. I like orange, if you hadn't noticed. My pile of orange pens from Poundland, a few of those Penguin Classics up. They have my measurements on, so I've always got them at hand. I think one of them's got Ian's measurements on in case I want to make him a shirt or pyjama bottoms or anything. And I keep my small scissors. These are Ernest Wright scissors, so treasured. And my pin cushion, all the stuff that I use often, I keep in here. Marking tools. I keep my thread snips that I have on a chain all the time, and my tape measure. And up here I've got my certificate for winning second place in Sew the 60s last year, the Sew My Style competition. And that Create the Things You Wish Existed is from Susie magazine last year. So my sewing table, my cutting table is out, and as I said, it's really big. I can just slide these off it. I've got 4 mats, enough to cover the table, so I can use it all the time for cutting. And then when they're not in use, I just slide them down here, just at the side of my sewing table, which keeps them flat and out of the way. So at the moment I'm cutting out a moto jacket, so there's plenty of room for me to cut out all my fabric on here, which is brilliant. And as I said, because this room is multi-purpose, the kettle's always handy to make myself a drink. I have my pressing station over here, so that's a really handy space. And that pretty much sums up my sewing space. There's the iron that I went on about, told you I loved. This ironing board is from a car boot sale. Bit more of my artwork up there. That is a copy of a 1960s painting that I found online and just copied it from the picture. Not all of my paintings are copies. I'll show you an original one that's over here. That one's original, of the milk bottle. I made that lampshade over there, and I need to cover that lampshade because that's just the one that came with it. I like to cover them in vintage fabric. That is a little shot of my home and the sofa where I sort of sit a lot of the time when I'm tired and recuperating. That's my quilting over here. I hope you've enjoyed that little insight into my sewing area, and also my what to see my Juki in action. I hope you enjoyed that little insight into my sewing space. I hope I went slowly enough for you and didn't make you feel seasick with my camera action. If you've enjoyed this, then please give me a thumbs up by clicking on the like button below, and click on the subscribe button, and if you click the bell next to it, ding ding, then you'll get notifications every time I post a new vlog. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I shall see you very, very soon. Kisses from Camden. Bye.